Hello, welcome to the non-dual lectionary again. We are here for the third Sunday of Easter in Year C, and I actually want to start because I think it folds into the lesson in a way that, at least for me, is helpful in teasing out what I think is maybe a non-dual nugget or two in here, with the way I understand, both from teaching and from experience, um, kind of the non-dual recognition, the non-dual realization, and how it interacts with what we might call experience. Because one way we can talk about, um, especially when we're reading scripture, is, oh, we also want to talk about our experience, and particularly not just experience sort of in the normal everyday small self version of it, but what we call this contemplative experience, this mystical experience, this non-dual quote experience. And that's a useful shorthand just for indicating we're talking about not beliefs, not ideas, not concepts, but something that happens, that's lived. But experience also indicates something that comes and goes, right? And the no self, the non-dual recognition at core is something that doesn't come and go. Not so much the recognition itself, right? But the truth of it. Your true nature does not come and go. Um, it is true nature from before and from it without beginning and end, right? And so in that context, I think it's useful, at least, again, to kind of think about experience in a new way. Because at the same time, I think many of us, unless you're somebody who just had that kind of one recognition realization and there it is, find that we have something that we would actually call an experience, right? Something that does come and go, and that at the same time seems to open up to something bigger, something that either gives us an insight, it might just be insight, right? Um, or something that that is like, even if it is an insight, it has like a beginning and an end, and yet at the same time it's powerful. It speaks to something bigger. It can be important, uh, important along the way that isn't that there is no along the way, right? So I kind of want to, one metaphor that kind of works for me that I'll introduce is like, imagine playing a video game, and it's an enthralling video game. It's so enthralling, engaging that you're you're seduced by it, that you're just playing it and forget everything else. You are just immersed in the game, even maybe a first person game to make it even better, right? But you're immersed in the video game. That's the whole world at that point. That is who you are, right? And then um, at something happens. You glimpse outside of the screen. Imagine the screen is filling up everything, right? But somehow you turn your head briefly and then come back. And that turning the head and coming back shows you in just a glimpse that there's something bigger than the video game, right? The video game was still happening, it's still on the screen, but there's something else. There's something bigger that has been true all along as you've been playing the video game, and that the video game is still not gone away. And yet that glimpse and look back can still be called an experience. And in fact, for the and now move outside of the metaphor, for our small self that here in the metaphor is in the video game, it co-opts that experience, right? So in this, it might even be like thought of, you might think of it as, oh, well, that must be a new a new add-on for the video game, like, oh, they give you this weird look, right, at something else. Um, but ultimately, right, there could just be a stable recognition that the world is bigger, that you are not the one just playing the video game. And yet you could still play the video game as that world is bigger, right? That there's more than just the screen. There always was more than was just the screen. That every experience, every turning the head, every glimpse along the way that got thought of as, oh, that was an experience, it came and went, or that was an add-on to the game. Whatever interpretation you give to it along the way, ultimately, those were thought of as experiences, but they were really revealing what was actually going on all the time. So I think that's at least a useful metaphor for me of um, of kind of the non-dual, what we can call experience, mystical experiences or non-dual glimpses along the way, right? Is that the small self, my that separate self that thinks it's real, co-opts those pretty quickly, and turns them into something else, or gives a story around them that they're not just what truly is, but ultimately there is just what truly is, right? And so now, with that with that background, let's turn to this gospel for the third Sunday of Easter, year C. It's John 21, chapters 1 through 19. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, We will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, Children, you have no fish, have you? They answered him, No. He said to them, Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, It is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, Bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them, and though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, Come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, Who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. A second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, Follow me. So I want to talk about one thing from each of these sort of two vignettes, right? The first, the appearance. And again, I talked about this already, not in this video, but previously about, the idea of belief. This often gets presented, this story, as something to factually adopt as true or not, right? As evidence that Jesus actually corporeally rose from the dead or not. If we're talking from a non-dual perspective, from a true self perspective, that just doesn't matter. But what we can glean out of this, I think, is something different. And the first is, what I recognize here is something like, we have these experiences, many of us who practice, who go on retreats, right, who find teachers that speak to us uniquely, who find that, particular teachers or particular teachings evoke something in us, bring something out, give us, what seems to be those experiences. We can then start to chase those experiences, right? Thinking that that's the thing. Like turning the head from the video game. I want to see more of that, right? Who else can turn my head? And nothing wrong with that. Obviously there's many of us who do that along the way. Um, one of the things that happens though too is we start to associate, right? That teacher, that hallucinogen, that particular practice with the thing that, I just need to generate more of these experiences and the two become linked, right? I have to go on more retreats with that teacher because that teacher brings the thing. Um, and the flip side of that, I think, is something perhaps that we see here, right? So the disciples, they have an experience, and the way that this gets told, and again, the people that are writing this, I mean, they're not, first of all, Jesus isn't writing this. Secondly, they're, writing this decades after Jesus died. So they're putting into words as best they can their experience, but they're having some kind of big experience, right? Something that says to them, wow, something is happening here. It gets put in the sense of, we were catching no fish and then we caught a whole bunch, and they associate it with the teacher that is no longer there, but this was the type of teacher that evoked this powerful thing in me before, and here they are again. And notice that they don't even ask, right? They knew it was him. None of them dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. I actually kind of love that, right? Because instead of this being a proof situation, right, where Jesus says, "Look, I'm him," it's we all know this is what it's like. We recognize this in our experience. We recognize this as true. We recognize this as loving. We recognize this recognition as what we've experienced before and as the real thing. So that's, I think, one way to understand that. Then the second vignette with Jesus and Peter, um, again, in the context that we're talking about, someone writing afterwards, right? Maybe not having the full experience themselves, maybe not having a stable, really living as that no self, but trying to put into words as best they can that experience, right? The glimpse, how did that and how they're incorporating that in. Um, so, the sense of if you love me, right? And love meaning all sorts of things. But, if you really embrace this, right? If you are really here, are you really here? Are you really in this? And Simon Peter saying, yes, 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 yes. And the lesson being taken away is practical, right? Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Um, and at the end, follow me, right? Again, I think the best way that I can understand this is again someone who is having that glimpse experience, that turn of the head, and then is trying to make sense of it as best they can. And the way they're making sense of it, and again, something that we get in maybe the Jesus story in the Christian tradition, maybe not so much in other traditions as much, is that real, embodied, manifest, take care of, show love, take care of the least of these, right? That no self-recognition then undoes all the pedestals that we put ourselves on and that we put others on and makes I mean immoral is such a strong word because there's moral and amoral, I mean if we're going non-dual, right, but makes nonsensical in a way, right, the um the fact that we would prefer power, we would prefer riches over anything else, and that people that are struggling in that sense, there's the Jesus story brings that preferential option for the poor, that love for the least. And so this is how it's being expressed, right? The glimpse, the experience, the best way that the writer or Simon Peter, recounting the tale, can convey. And so, fundamentally, right, if that metaphor lands for you, right, it's all what is. And these glimpses, these experiences are taking that brief, quick look at what is, that understand how I can see what is, but then, oh, it gets confused or it gets taken away. And so I can only interpret it as best I can. I can only embody it as best I can. I can only, make sense of it as best I can. So fundamentally, it is what is, and in a beautiful way. Then, right? Like I understood that experience to be, linking me back to my teacher or to that deep truth, or I understood, this way of acting with love or care in the world to be the expression of that. And so, yeah, a beautiful little story.